So basically, we were talking about the receiving of the stimulus, um, and we assume that suppose we are receiving a stimulus on our foot, and we have pain receptors there. Those pain receptors are attached to the dendrites, just like the switchboard is attached to the wires. And when the pain receptor brings the change, that change is transported to the dendrites. Now when the dendrites receive that change, they would initiate the impulse, and that impulse would be transported to the impulse would be transported to the towards the central nervous system with the help of the axon. Now I can clearly say that it is a sensory neuron. Why I can say that? Number one, it is attached to the receptor. It is attached to my senses. One point, if a neuron is attached to my senses, it is a sensory neuron. Second, it has a cell body on the side, so it means that it 100% is a sensory neuron. Now, this sensory neuron has reached inside the spinal cord. Before telling you all this, I would like you to know that the spinal cord has two sides. One side of the spinal cord is present close to our back. You can just say it's our back. Uh, it's our skin of our backside, just suppose. So it means that this one is closer. Excuse me. This one is closer to our skin, or this one is closer to outside, and this one is like it is closer to the inside of the body. So I would say this part of our body as dorsal. I would call this part of our body as dorsal, and this part of the spinal cord would be called as the ventral part. Always remember, any part that is present above with respect to the other part towards the backside is called as dorsal. Let's suppose the kidneys are located closer to our back as compared to the stomach. So, what would you say? The kidneys are dorsal to the stomach because they
Okay.
are closer to our back,
Yes.
and the stomach is ventral to the kidneys because it's towards the inside. So, basically, this is a rule. Let me tell you, I was just avoiding this rule, but let me tell you, when you consider in animal kingdom, the organisms in animal kingdom are mostly um, four-legged, four-legged or four limbs. Any side that is facing the sky is called as dorsal, and any side that is facing the ground is called as ventral. If you consider human as a four-legged animal, and if a human stands on all four limbs, what would be on the dorsal side? On the dorsal side, you would have your back, and on the ventral side, you would have your stomach and liver, etc. So, with reference to each other, the organs are also dorsal and ventral. But about the heart, you would say the heart is anterior to stomach. What does it mean? It is more closer to the head. Head and dorsal are not equal things. Anterior is this side. This is anterior. This is anterior and this is posterior. So heart is anterior to stomach, not dorsal to stomach. So this is something, although not present in the syllabus, but these are minor things that should be in the knowledge of a biology student. Okay, so basically, the sensory neuron is entering into the spinal cord from the dorsal side. From the dorsal side. Remember, this is another opening. Two openings are there. One opening is the one is this from which the sensory neuron is entering, and there is another opening. Now, this opening would be called as ventral, and this is called as dorsal opening. Okay. Now, one more thing I need you to know, that not only one sensory neuron is present here. You have to be very much careful while talking about this. See, this one is your nerve. No doubt the neurons are present in the nerves, but a single neuron cannot bring all the stimuli at a time. So many neurons are bringing the stimuli. That is why you would say that this one, collectively this one is a nerve that is taking the stimulus towards the spinal cord. It's a nerve, and obviously since it is taking the stimulus towards the spinal cord, towards the central nervous system, so you would say it's a sensory nerve, but it is a nerve, not a single neuron. Did you understand that?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, one more thing. I need to erase one thing from here, because one thing, otherwise the one concept would become, you can just say it would become wrong. Okay, once the sensory neuron has entered the spinal cord, now over here you would find a neuron, another neuron. Now what do you think, what neuron is this? What would you call this neuron? This one is a relay neuron or interneuron. Why? Because it can take the stimulus towards the brain. It can take the stimulus towards the brain. The sensory neuron would stop here. Genuinely, the sensory neuron would stop here. There is no use of sensory neuron after this point. So the sensory neuron would stop here. But once the sensory neuron would stop here, who would take the stimulus to the brain now? If this sensory neuron is stopping here, the rest of the stimulus would be handed over to the next sensory neuron, which would be taking it towards the brain. And sometimes, sometimes, while, or you can say, when the stimulus is being transported towards the brain, it is also returned back. This phenomena is called as your reflex action. This particular thing is called as reflex arc. And if you are going to respond without the command of the brain, that is called as a reflex action. I'll be telling you on the next page about the reflex action. But right now, remember that first of all, I was telling you how the stimulus would reach the nervous system. So, nervous system has reached the stimulus has reached the nervous system with the help of the sensory neuron. From there, it can go to the brain, and the brain processes it, and it would return the stimulus with the help of the motor neuron or sensory neuron. When the brain has processed it, which neuron the brain would use?
Like, what do you mean like the brain has processed?
When the brain has processed, or it has stored the information, it has processed it, how should we react to it? When the brain decides how it would now respond with the help of motor neuron.
Motor, because it would now be
Yes,
taking action.
yes. So now the brain would return, but sometime it happens, sometimes in case of emergency stimuli, in case of emergency stimuli like unconscious touch, unconscious touching, or pain, the impulse would return back from the spinal cord before being commanded, before being commanded by the brain. This is called as reflex action. You may have felt that sometime we feel the pain later, but we respond earlier. That happens when you are returning the stimulus before telling the brain. The spinal cord is returning the impulse, and it is returning the impulse towards the motor nerve. Motor nerve. And many motor neurons would move there. Now, these are the axons of the motor. These are the axons of the motor nerve. And then, now, if you focus on the point, you can see these axons, all these axons are of motor nerves. And over here, all these axons are of sensory neurons. But they are combining at a point where the axons of sensory nerves and motor nerves are combining. Now, as I have told you, this one is sensory nerve, this one is motor nerve. But what would you call this nerve where all the axons of sensory and motor nerves are combining? This point, what would you call this point?
I don't know the name, but
Both
it's
the,
where they both
I'm
join,
sorry,
right?
they are both joining like in a single nerve.
So would they coordinate?
No, 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 no. The third type of nerve, one is sensory nerve, another one is motor nerve. The third type was where both the sensory and motor axons are combining.
Oh yeah. Um, what was the name? Was it the Vegas nerve?
No, 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 no. It's a mixed nerve. Mixed nerve. Remember, okay, let me redraw this diagram so that you can easily understand it. See, this is the spinal cord, because most of the thing that I wanted to tell you is covered. Now, focus. This is the dorsal side of the spinal cord. From the dorsal side, you will see only the sensory axons are entering. Then this is the ventral side of the nerves or the spinal cord. Over here, you would only find motor axons. But after some time, after some distance from the spinal cord, they are going to combine with each other. It means now this nerve has both sensory and motor axons. What would you call this nerve now? This nerve now would be called as what?
The mixed nerve.
Yeah, this is sensory nerve, this is motor nerve, and this is now mixed nerve. Mixed nerve. Okay, so let's stop here for a moment. If I ask you, what is the definition of a sensory nerve?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What is the definition of a sensory nerve?
So nerves that transfer um like how do you explain it?
Okay, let me ask you, what is the definition of sensory neuron?
So they carry signals to your brains to help you
Hmm. Now, what's
touch,
a
taste,
sensory nerve
smell, and
then?
see. Sorry, what is the?
Sensory nerve, then. If it's a sensory neuron, that the definition you just told, and what's a sensory nerve?
So they carry the signals to your brain.
But what is the difference between neuron and nerve?
So the actual nerve cell is the neuron.
Nerve cell is the neuron, and the bundle of neuron is nerves.
Yeah.
Now it means that if it is a sensory nerve, then we mean by this we mean that nerve that sensory nerve basically is containing all the axons, especially the axons from the sensory all the axons from the sensory neurons. In sensory nerve, all the axons from the sensory neurons are found, but in the motor nerves, you will find all the axons from the motor neurons. That is the major difference you need to remember. All right, so now we are aware that when they are attached to the spinal cord, when they are attached to the spinal cord, the sensory and motor nerves are different. Sensory and motor nerve are different. This is sensory nerve, this is motor nerve. But after some distance from the spinal cord, the sensory and motor are becoming one, and now we'll call it as a mixed nerve. Okay, so is it understood?
Yeah.
So basically, when you will see in this mixed nerve, let me remove this one. I will write it a bit above so I can mention some more things. Um, this is this side, and this is the other side. Now you will find, hold on, you will find many axons up here which are taking the impulses on this side, and you will find many axons here which are taking the impulse towards this side. But when you would enter on the dorsal side, you will see that only neurons are taking the impulse towards the central nervous system. And when you will see this side, only they are taking it away from the spinal cord or central nervous system. Clearly, it is evident that the lower one or the ventral one is the motor nerve and the dorsal one is the sensory nerve, but they are becoming one, so we'll call them mixed nerve. All right, so now as I was saying, that the reflex action can happen, and reflex action always happens when you have a pain stimulus in your foot. Now try to mix it with the try to combine this concept with the previous concept where we said that the impulses are being transported from spinal cord to the brain. If they are conscious impulses, if the impulses are conscious, then they would the spinal cord would never act on its own. But if the impulse is something that you did not know, then you would just respond involuntary. What is the meaning of involuntary?
So you didn't do it on purpose.
Can you repeat it? Your voice lagged.
So involuntary is something that you didn't do out of choice.
Yes, totally unconscious, and you did not do it out of your choice. So reflex action is always out of your choice. But if you are doing something voluntary, it means that you are doing it out of your choice, meaning that this is in your choice. You are selecting to do it. You are trying to do it. In that case, first the stimulus would go to your brain, and then it would come back. But you can see over here, you can see over here that the stimulus, when it is going towards the spinal cord, there are two chances. First, it goes to the brain, then it comes back. That is totally a voluntary action. But if it is going back towards the receptor, if it is going back towards the receptor before going to the brain, that means it is a reflex action. And since it makes an arc like path, we call it a reflex arc. Since it makes an arc like path, we call it a reflex arc. So that is what the meaning of reflex arc and reflex action. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Now, I try to do one more thing here. Try to do one more thing. Suppose that you are receiving a pain stimulus here. Pain stimulus. Your This is the upper side of, you can say this is just the thigh, and from your thigh, the stimulus is reaching the spinal cord. Over here, the spinal cord is present, and axon is leading the impulse towards the spinal cord. The spinal cord immediately returns it. It is immediately returning it. Now, what are you going to do? Do you need to move the nerve impulse back to the same place where the stimulus is given? No. Remember that you need to move your leg. You need to move your leg, and your leg would be moved by the muscles present in your thigh. So this is the point of effect. Over here, your effector would show the response. Always remember that it is not necessary that you will show the response from the same point where you received the stimulus. Suppose you are touching something with your hand. You don't only move your hand, you move your arm. So basically, you are not moving the muscles of your hand, you are moving the muscles of your arm. Similarly, when you are trying to move your leg, you are using the muscle of your thigh. That is why the motor neurons would be would be stimulating the muscles in your thigh, and you would be moving your leg. And the spinal cord would also move the impulse towards the brain. So that is why, since it is making this path, it is called as reflex arc. I hope it is understood.
Yeah.
Now, what are the reflexes? We have two definitions of reflexes. One is a common definition, another one is the biological definition. The reflexes in our common definition means that anything that you can do uh, in a blink of an eye. Like, what sport do you play mostly?
Football and cricket.
Football and cricket. So when you play cricket, especially when you are when you are trying to grab a catch, you are you need to be very quick.
Yeah.
So people say that if you are, especially if you are a keeper, people say that your reflexes have to be strong.
Yeah.
Those are not reflexes. Those are those are your quick movements, no doubt. But remember that those are not reflexes. By definition, the reflex mean something that is unplanned, totally involuntary. Did not do it by yourself. That is called as the reflex. That is, but when you are standing as a keeper and you are trying to grab the ball, you are not showing the reflex action. You are just uh, doing something that you are trained for. It might be your muscle memory, it might be your you can say training that is making you jump. It might be your muscles that are properly trained during a training. but it is not reflex action.
Yeah.
What is a reflex? A reflex is when and nobody has any control over the reflexes. Nobody. How can I say it for sure? Suppose if you are sitting in front of a doctor and he touches a particular point of your leg, of your knee. You might have heard about this experiment in the junior classes that you sit in front of a doctor and he is going to tap your knee with the help of a very, you can say, surgical hammer like thing, and he's going to touch you, and you are all conscious that he's going to touch me. I must not show any response, but still your leg moves.
Yeah.
Still your leg moves. That is the reflex.
Okay.
Always involuntary. Remember, why am I spending time in telling you that? Because basically it is asked in a paper. It is asked in the question in 2 marker or 3 marker. Examples. The increase in your heartbeat out of any bad news or good news or scary news, that is your reflex. The you getting scared is a reflex. Remember, this reflex has many different forms. In very much excitement, your body has some hormones that are released, and in very much excitement, your body is showing some like reflexive movements. That is the point. That is the thing you say that as you call as the reflex.
Yeah.
Okay. So, um, one thing you may notice in this picture, if you zoom it, you will see that I have drawn the nerve continuously from here till here. But over here, you are finding a distance. Why is that? Reflex is finished. Now, the um the thing is that do the neurons do the neurons have breaks in them? Are they physically connected? Do two neurons connect physically? Now, this is a very big question, and you can see that clearly in the picture that I drew on the previous Jamboard. You can clearly see that if I redraw the spinal cord, you will clearly see that the axon is coming here. These are the last part of the axon, and over here you see the relay neuron, and having many dendrites on it, but none of the dendrites is basically touching the axon physically. Similarly, if you see that over here, you will also see many dendrites, but none of them would be touching any dendrite of the, even the dendrites. This is the motor neuron, the cell body of motor neuron, but none of the axons from the relay neuron are touching the dendrites of the motor neuron. Why is that? Because the answer to this question is no. 95% of the neurons are not physically connected. They are not physically connected. The neurons are connected with the help of with the help of uh, the neurons are connected with the help of the chemicals. Like they are not physically connected. If I try to explain that, I will basically magnify this particular part. On one side, you see that this is one axon terminal, like one part of the axon. There are one, two, three, four terminals of the axon, but I am only magnifying one of them. And at a distance, you will find dendrites. Okay, I'll draw only one of them, only one dendrite. Now you see a very clear gap. This gap is called as the synapse. This is a microscopic gap, and it is called as a synapse. And uh, or it is also named as synaptic cleft. And over here, you will find the fluid. Obviously, this you may call it a synaptic fluid, but it is the fluid. Now, with reference to synapse, always remember we need to know many things. Number one, the direction of the nerve impulse is this. The nerve impulse is moving here till the terminal of the axon. Then it would be moving into the next neuron, relay neuron. Now, with reference to the synapse, this one would be called as the presynaptic neuron. And this one would be called as the postsynaptic neuron. Now, what is our main purpose? Our main purpose is to transfer the impulse. Our main purpose is to transfer the impulse from the presynaptic neuron to postsynaptic neuron. Uh, Impulse has to be transported to the postsynaptic neuron. How it is going to be possible? I have said that neurons are connected with the help of chemicals. What kind of chemicals they are? Remember that when the impulse reaches at the end of the, okay, this one is called as, remember, this whole part is called as synaptic bulb. This is called as synaptic bulb. And inside the synaptic bulb, you will find many vesicles. These are also called as synaptic vesicles. These are also called as Now, these vesicles contain chemicals. And remember that these chemicals are named as neurotransmitters. You may have heard about it. Neurotransmitters. When the impulse reaches at the terminal, the vesicle would start moving. The impulse is going to stimulate the vesicle. The impulse is going to stimulate the vesicle. The vesicle would move forward and it would fuse with the membrane of this neuron called as synaptic membrane. This one is called as the synaptic membrane. Now, the synaptic vesicle is going to fuse with the synaptic membrane and it would release all the chemicals in the synapse or synaptic cleft. Now, these chemicals are going to be received on the membrane of the next neuron, and there are many receptors for these chemicals. There are many receptors for these chemicals. Once these chemicals would attach to these receptors, the impulse would be transported. Impulse would be transported. So I can say number one, the impulse reaches to the terminal. Number two, it would stimulate the vesicle. Number three, the vesicle would fuse with the synaptic membrane. Number four, the neurotransmitter would diffuse into the synapse. Number five, the neurotransmitters would attach to the receptors. And number six, the impulse would be transported to postsynaptic neuron. Six steps are there. This is how the impulses are transported. Remember, they are not physically connected. Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Are you sure you want to have a look again?
I'll revise after the class.
Okay. So basically, this is how the impulse is going to be transported. Now we need to talk about some examples of the examples of neurotransmitters. What kind of neurotransmitter chemicals we have? So we have three very general, many types of them. One type of neurotransmitter is the dopamine that brings the sensation of excitement, achievement, and pleasure. Then there is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine that basically releases from nerves and stimulates the muscles. Like when we need to make our muscles work, we release acetylcholine, stimulate the muscles. They are going to excite our muscles. Then we have adrenaline. You know that adrenaline is a very potent neurotransmitter, leading us to the fight or flight response. Fight or flight. Okay. Dopamine, acetylcholine, adrenaline. Then there is another one called as GABA. It is responsible during our sleep. There is another one that is a hormone, melatonin, but that is a hormone. Hormone and neurotransmitter are different things. So there are some others, but we don't need to know about it. Remember that drugs, now you need to focus on drugs imitate the neurotransmitters. Drugs basically imitate the neurotransmitters, and it would just they would directly act on your nervous system. You know why drugs have such a strong effect? Even many drugs, medicinal drugs, don't have that strong effect um, compared to the addictive drugs. Compared to the addictive drugs. So it means it means that basically the drugs like opium, like the heroin, the cannabis, the poppy, these kinds of drugs are actually going to these kinds of drugs are actually going to act on our synapse. Drugs imitate neurotransmitters and attach on synaptic receptors. That is why they basically have a very strong effect. Is it understood?
Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is, when we go back to the concept of the coordination, you will feel that we have been talking about like the principle of coordination. What is the principle of coordination? Stimulus, then receptor, then coordinator, then effector, and then response. Didn't we design the same thing yesterday?
Yeah, we did.
Now, we basically were discussing about the neurons. We basically were discussing about the neurons which are involved in the communication between the receptor and coordinator, and the communication between the coordinator and effector. But do we know the examples of the receptors? And do we know the examples of the effectors? Let's see. We did discuss the examples of them, but let's clarify these things. Remember that the receptors are all your senses. What are our senses? Senses?
Taste, smell,
Mm,
hearing, seeing, feeling.
touch like thing. So, um, obviously, vision is another stimulus. Vision is another type of, you can say, stimulus, and it would be received on our eyes. Then there is voice, we receive through ears. Ears are also there. Then nose, taste buds, they are like chemical receptors like things. Even we have some other receptors, the chemical. See, chemical receptor is a general terminology. Chemical receptors can be found many at many locations in our bodies. Like oxygen receptors are also chemical receptors, water receptors, pH receptors, carbon dioxide receptors, taste receptors, even olfaction, the smell receptors are chemical receptors. So we have many kinds of receptors, out of which we need to talk about eyes. Similarly, what are our effectors? Effectors are those which make the effect, muscles, through which we are going to show response. So muscles are effectors. Then a very big effector is a glands. Glands. Glands secrete chemicals as a response. They secrete chemicals as a response. So these are actually different examples. Now, actually, what do we do? According to our syllabus, we'll discuss the eyes and we'll discuss the glands. These two are main focus. So since don't have much time for now, so I will first discuss the glands. Then I'll start the topic of eye in the next lesson, and it would be finished in only one lesson. All right. What are the glands? Now, try to understand the thing. The glands are actually they respond they respond like according to stimulus, but their response is delayed. Response is delayed. Why? Remember that glands are secretory cells. Secretory cells. And secretory means they have secretions. And secretions have to diffuse through secretions have to diffuse through uh, a distance from one location to another, from one location to another. Like let's make a simple point here. Let's say there is a gland. A gland releases a chemical, and that chemical reaches to a target organ. What is the target organ? A target organ is the organ to which a chemical is supposed to reach. A target organ is an organ to which the chemical is supposed to reach. So, now the gland, obviously, the gland is going to receive a stimulus from the brain. Suppose that brain tells the gland that secrete this. It would secrete a chemical, and the chemical would reach to target organ. Now, it would take time. It would take a lot of time. That is why the response of the glands, the response showed by the glands is always delayed. Remember what we are saying, that effectors are of two types, muscles or glands. Now, muscles are very quick. Muscles are often studied in A2. Muscles are often studied in A2. So they are quick. Obviously, there is a very complex structure in them. But when it comes to glands, glands do release a chemical. The chemical reaches to the target site. It shows the response. But the problem is it takes time. So that is why some of the we are going to check and see some of the glands and how do they work. So let's see um, how the glands work. No, hang on. Okay, now yes, that is the thing. I am continuously saying that chemical is being transported from one location to another. Now, what is the source? The, what is the source of what is the source of the chemical transfer? Like how the chemicals are transferred? Can you guess that if there is a gland, if there is an organ in your brain, that is a gland. What is the property of a gland? A property of a gland is to release chemical, to secrete chemical. My question is, a gland secretes a chemical. How do you suppose that it would be reaching the target organ? What would be the source of transfer?
Um, Not sure.
Any guess?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the release of the chemical from the gland till the target organ, there are multiple sources. Number one, number one source is through ducts, like sweat glands, like salivary glands, even pancreas, because it has a bile duct, if you remember, and it transfers the pancreatic juice to the intestine. So those are chemicals as well. Then even the liver, or you may say gallbladder. So they all have ducts. So one way to transfer the chemical from the gland to the target is through the ducts. This kind of system, remember, this kind of system that uses the duct or is called as exocrine system. It is called as exocrine system. Then comes another system that transfers its secretion through blood. It basically means it flushes its secretions into the blood. Into the blood. This kind of system, from where a gland is releasing its secretion into the blood and then that secretion is being transported to target, this system is called as endocrine system. Have you heard this word before?
Yes, I've heard of it.
So endocrine system is really important because we have very much complexity of this system, like unimaginable. Now, obviously, we have exocrine glands. First, this is first exocrine gland. This is second exocrine gland. This is third exocrine gland. We might have more. Then we have endocrine glands. So let's talk about different types of endocrine glands that we are going to study. We have multiple endocrine glands. Remember, we know a lot of endocrine glands, but in this syllabus, we will talk about some of them. We will talk about pituitary gland, but not in this chapter. We will be talking about it in the human reproductive system. Then we have adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. Hmm. Pancreas, insulin, testes, spleen, glucagon, adrenaline. Okay. So then there is another endocrine gland called as testicles. Again, we'll be talking about the testicles in the human reproductive system. Then ovaries. These three, which I'm going to mark with the blue, all these three would be discussed in the human reproductive system. Another one that we are going to discuss in this chapter is the pancreas. These are the names of those few glands which are endocrine glands, and we are going to talk about them in our syllabus. So let's talk about, first of all, the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is basically located just above the kidneys. Adrenal means, literally means above kidney. And the outer part of the adrenal gland is called as the cortex, and the inner part is called as the medulla. For your knowledge, the cortex releases the body steroids. These are the same steroids which, if taken from outside, become very dangerous. But these steroids are naturally built in our bodies. Medulla is supposed to be releasing a hormone called as adrenaline. Now, the thing is, the adrenaline is discussed in two ways. It is discussed in two ways. One way of discussing the adrenaline is as a neurotransmitter. I have already told you While talking about the neurotransmitter, I said the adrenaline is one of the neurotransmitter. Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Hmm. Then the adrenaline hormone. Remember about these hormones, the hormones can never be found between the neurons. The neurotransmitters are named neurotransmitters just because they are found between the neurons as a communication source. But the hormones are directly flushed into the blood, and adrenaline is a hormone that is supposed to be released, supposed to be released in response to in response to a condition called as fight or flight. Fight or flight. Emergency situation. Emergency situation are basically tackled with the help of this hormone. Now, what are these conditions? Examples: fight or flight. So let's suppose let discuss examples. What example do you have? What is actually the literal meaning of fight or flight? What do you think?
Um, so something like a reaction, the body, the reaction occurs when it's faced with danger, maybe.
Fight does not literally mean to fight. It means tackle. Flight means avoid. Tackle or avoid. This is one type of emergency situation. Now, examples. What do you think the examples of the emergency situation or the fight or flight?
Sorry, what do you mean?
What are some type of emergency situation in which you think that adrenaline should be released?
Something like if there's a gunshot and you need to dodge it or go down to the floor or something.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Um, Maybe if someone punches you and you have to dodge it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay.
Basically, any threaten, I mean, any action that's maybe threatening your well-being.
Pain, threat, bad or very good news, bad or good news, excitement, danger. Then you can say bad expectation, bad expectation, accident, running away. Any condition in which you assume yourself in a bit, um, I would say, odd condition, a rage, even during the reproductive activity. Now you see that anything that you think about as dangerous would release the adrenaline in your body. Even just you are sitting there, like if maybe you have much confidence, But if someone asks you that you have a presentation tomorrow, you have to present this topic in front of all the people. Would you feel a bit panicked or
Maybe,
discomfort?
yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. That would be the adrenaline rush. Even let me tell you one thing. I've been talking for like I've been teaching for much longer. When I go and stand in front of a new class, mm, which I haven't taught for once, I always feel a bit discomfort. I always feel a bit, I would not say panic. I would say discomfort that these people, these faces are not known. So I don't know whether they respect me or not. So that would make me a bit sensitive. And that is the time adrenaline would release. Even now, when we teachers go to the interview, we get panicked. We've been giving so many interviews for now. We've been going to so many schools, presenting in front of so many classes. But we still have that slight feeling of panic. That is the time the adrenaline would release, even at that time. And let me tell you one thing, one step ahead. Sometime teaching to the same class requires the rush of adrenaline because we don't, uh, when we are excited, we teach more properly. So, adrenaline is required. Similarly, sorrow. Even let me give you a specific term thing. Bee sting. Like, have you ever experienced a bee sting?
Yeah, I have.
Like, instantly you feel pain,
Yeah.
and that pain is the source of adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And for a very small time, you get, maybe not for very long, but for a very small time, you get frightened. Where is the bee? Is it coming back?
I mean,
Is it going to
it would
sting?
die. It would die when it stings you, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like if you don't know about it,
Yeah.
is it coming back? Is it going to sting me again? So
Yeah.
that is enough. Those two thoughts are enough to rush the adrenaline in your blood. That is the point. These are different points. So it's a very daily life hormone, very much of a daily life. Sometimes you are in a fight or flight situation and you don't even know. Let me give you a very beautiful example. Games, not sports, computer games. The sports which are requiring the vigorous activity 100% require adrenaline rush. Cricket, football, any
Yeah.
other thing, they would 100% require adrenaline rush. But I'm talking about the games. You know why the games are becoming so addictive?
I
Because
thought that was
people,
more because of dopamine.
yes, but people are getting junkies of adrenaline and dopamine.
Yeah.
So those are the things which release different types of hormones, but dopamine is not a hormone, it's a neurotransmitter. Anyways, so what are the effects of adrenaline? Now, this is very interesting. Number one, rise in blood pressure, change in breathing rate. How it rises, and deep breathing. Deep breathing means when you are breathing, you are inhaling and exhaling large volumes. Third, rise in pulse rate. Pulse rate. Number four, vasodilation towards the skin. What is vasodilation? Did I tell you?
No, you haven't told me.
Mhm. Vasodilation, basically, vaso refers to vessel, and dilation means expansion. Expansion. You expand the vessel, and the purpose of vasodilation is to increase the volume of blood, increase the volume of blood towards an organ, towards an organ. Then comes another terminology, vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction means narrowing. What do you think? Why do you think we need vasoconstriction? To reduce the blood volume towards an organ. Sometimes we don't need an organ. Suppose, do you need stomach while you are running?
No, like,
No. You don't
yeah,
need the kidneys. You don't need. I do, I don't mean to say that you should be putting them apart. Basically,
yeah,
I'm saying that they do not participate. We don't need kidneys. We don't need bladder. We don't need pancreas. So what do? We reduce the supply of blood towards these organs. This is called as vasoconstriction. So vasodilation towards skin and muscles. Number five, vasoconstriction towards internal organs. Internal organs. Do you have a class next?
no.
Okay, just some points and I'll finish the class. Vasoconstrictions towards internal organ means that stomach would not be receiving more blood. And then dilation of pupil. Dilation of pupil. Do you have any idea about it? What is a pupil?
Yeah, it's in
You
the
should
eye.
have. Yeah. It basically controls the entry of light. So it to increase the light received at retina. Because when you are in danger, you need more light. When you are more excited, when you are very ferocious, you need light. You need your eye to see more. Then seventh, um, reduced sweating. Sweating. Then, yeah, one more very important thing, converting glycogen to glucose. What would be the benefit of it?
So you can use it for energy.
Yeah, you can use it for energy. So, rise in BP, change in breathing, rise in pulse rate, vasodilation towards skin and muscles, towards internal organs, dilation of pupil, reduced sweating, converting glucagon to glycogen. Okay. Breathing rate, heart rate, pupil diameter, glucagon, etc. Okay. Increasing blood glucose concentration, increasing heart rate. So everything covered. Now, this is basically what would happen when you would when you would be facing any condition related to fight or flight. It does not mean you are under stress. This is very important to know. People often think that adrenaline would only be released when you are under stress or in very dangerous situation. No, it is not necessary. So we'll be talking about from this part. We'll be talking about the pancreas in the next class and two more topics.